My name is Will Straw. I'm an interpretive dancer. Just kidding. I'm a professor at McGill University. Same thing. The most exciting thing I did last year was to go to Sao Paulo, Brazil, where I helped to write something called the Night Manifesto. With artists, activists, urbanists, cultural promoters, we called for a Sao Paulo night that was safe, accessible, and permissive. In cities all over the world, in fact, groups like these are pushing cities to change the ways in which they deal with the night. That's the group of us in Sao Paulo. So I want to talk about night and how animating the night and opening up the night and reinventing the night is one of the most interesting things that cities can do. Historians of the night sometimes talk about a process that they call nocturnalization, and they mean by this the way in which human activities have moved ever more deeply into the night over history. People in the 19th century ate dinner 2 or 3 hours later than they had a few centuries earlier. Theater performances were pushed closer and closer to midnight. Lighting, of course, electrical lighting, gas lighting before that made it more and more possible for there to be a public life in cities at night. Work no longer stopped with the setting of the sun, but became continuous when the owners of capital no longer wanted factories to sit idle for half or 1/3 of the 24-hour cycle. In cities around the world, over the last 20 years, the night has really moved to the center, or close to the center, of public policy. If you look at most of the 20th century, the urban night tended to be seen in particular ways. It was a territory into which politicians didn't like to venture too much. It was a set of problems rather than opportunities. And most importantly, perhaps, the night was seen as that part of the 24-hour cycle which only belonged to some people, and in which women, people of color, those without means, experienced their oppression most intensely. The French geographer Luc Rodzinski once pointed out that citizenship waxes and wanes over the course of the 24-hour cycle of day and night. If you're a woman, a visible minority, and so on, your right to occupy the city, to feel secure in it, and to feel entitled might decline sharply at night. And so we get events like the Sao Paulo Manifesto, which stakes a claim on the night and on the right of everyone to claim it as their own. We also get events like this one, the General Estates of the Night, held in Paris in 2010, which brought together nightclub owners, organizations that worked with the homeless, representatives of the police, representatives of transit authorities, and a variety of others to think about how the Parisian night might be saved and improved and made more accessible. Indeed, the last decade has seen a seemingly endless stream of initiatives intended to transform the night. Some of these simply want to make the night more playful and ludic, like this art project in the UK that became an incredible success, and all they did was shine a light on a street at night and ask people to come and stand in it. And people stood and they danced. That's where my interpretive dancing career actually began. Others want to make, of course, the night more worthy and uplifting, like Nuit Blanche art festivals, museum nights, Noche del Museos, which happen in Canada and throughout the world. Some cities are trying to make the night more virtuous. For example, the first night festivities in places like Burlington, Vermont on New Year's Eve, where you basically turn the night into a child-friendly, alcohol-free zone, purging it of its associations with debauchery and excess, something Montrealers have to read over again to make sure they got that right. The question of how we animate our cities, as I said, is bound up with how we treat our nights. Traditionally, we have tried to tame and control our nights. When Variety, the show business newspaper, called Montreal the wickedest city in the world in 1925, the police moved in to shut down the night. In contrast, the thinking now is that we make the night more hospitable by opening it up, by diversifying it. When Victoria, British Columbia had to deal with hordes of students pissing and vomiting on its city streets a few years ago, the answer was not to close down the night further, but in fact to open it up, to allow more activities, to stimulate the building of more venues, to build more public washrooms as well. The city of Paris a couple of years ago did something that other Europeans have begun to do. They allowed those who work in the night to appoint someone called a night mayor. And don't say nightmare, they've already heard that joke 1,000 times. Someone who would represent their interests. And indeed, I've met the night mayors of Paris, Amsterdam, and Toulouse. They're usually youngish, smart people who mediate between the interests of the nighttime cultural sector and a city government that usually has no idea what goes on in the night or in that sector. The notion of the night mayor is based on the principle that people don't just occupy neighborhoods, that is, spatial divisions in the city. They are also what some urban policy thinkers in Europe now call temporal communities. They occupy the city in terms of particular times. They're defined by the periods of time in which they make use of the city. In Paris, like so many other cities, the night has become a battleground between those who want to maintain a lively, exciting, and noisy cultural life and those who perhaps move downtown to take part in this assignment but now want things to be quiet so that they can raise their children or calculate their mortgage payments. All over the world, from Montreal to Mumbai, we're seeing signs like this. This is Montreal, la nuit, le bruit nuit. At night, noise hurts. In France, and I don't have a picture of this, unfortunately, but horror of horrors, a group of mimes called les Pierrots de la nuit wanders the city at night, putting their fingers to their lips and telling people to shh. That's French for shh. We don't yet have les Pierrots de la nuit in Montreal. We don't have a mayor of the Montreal night either. There has been talk for several years of a general estates of the night. That is yet to happen, although Denis Coderre says he's interested in that idea. We do have a mayor who is anxious to open up the Montreal night to make certain districts into 24/7 shopping and entertainment areas. If this were to happen, I wonder simply what will happen to the experimental, transgressive character of the Montreal night. Will it become fully commodified, Disneyized? Will the live music venues, which are outside of these entertainment areas, in the Plateau, in Mile End, and so on, continue to be shut down by never-ending fines and police visits? The night, says geographer Luc Wadinsky, is the city's last frontier, dernière frontière de la ville. How do we deal with the frontier between night and day? Do we strengthen it, tear it down, open it up? How we respond to this question, I think, will say a lot about the kinds of cities in which we want to live. Good night.